have emailed the,
Got it.
okay,
Got
good.
that, yeah.
All right. I just want everyone to be as current as possible on things.
Brevity is not my strong suit.
Thoroughness is, though. All right, Mr. Sims, Mr. Matthews, come on up.
This, Your Honor, is quite stuffy and has no air conditioning, so I'll sit with Ms. Charles if it's okay.
It's okay with her. Ms. Rivers, you ready to pivot to our suppression hearing?
Yes, I'm ready.
Great. This is case 21 SC 177524, State versus Tyrone Sims. Ms. Charles is here for the state. Mr. Matthews, good afternoon, sir, is here with his client, Mr. Sims. Both are present. And Mr. Matthews, I understand that it was a juggling feat for you to be here. You've been off the clock for a while, and when you got back, you realized you had some conflicts, and I usually try to accommodate, but I was anxious to take care of this, and so I apologize insofar as that has disrupted the other matter that you brought to Ms. Nelson's attention. I wasn't trying to be cavalier in that way. Something had to give, and I trust you'll be able to pick up those depositions soon, but not this afternoon. I appreciate you being here.
No worries, Judge. Thank you.
So we are here to work through a motion to suppress that Mr. Matthews filed. I can't remember if it was late discovery that prompted. It's a late motion, but not late in the sense of why the heck did you not file this sooner? Something came up at the call of the calendar that caused Mr. Matthews to say, wait, I'm going to have a motion to suppress. And your explanation of it, Mr. Matthews, was, yeah, I think that's timely. So I'm not here to fuss at anyone, but we're dealing with it now in the middle of a trial calendar, rather than way back when, maybe when we should have, since this incident was in September of 2020. But it's a motion to suppress a stop. And I'm just wanting to walk through what the issue is. So I'm thinking about it the right way legally as the evidence is being presented. Mr. Sims is charged with possession of some controlled substances triggered by not wearing a seatbelt. That's supposedly why he was pulled over, except in your motion, it doesn't sound like a pullover so much as an officer maybe working an extra job saw Mr. Sims roll by without the seatbelt on, but ultimately the police citizen encounter occurred after Mr. Sims had brought his vehicle to a stop. And then maybe there was the odor of marijuana. I couldn't tell because the way you particularized your motion, it went in a few directions. And the part that surprised me most of all is that really what you seem to be concerned about constitutionally for your client was there was an invalid checkpoint because it was not authorized by a supervisor. It may have been something that officers working extra jobs at the Etheridge Apartments were conducting. So before Ms. Charles calls any witnesses, I wanted you, Mr. Matthews, to make clearer to me the points at which you think there were unconstitutional issues, either with the stop or what it was. because I'll have questions for the witnesses too, based on what your claims are.
Absolutely, Your Honor. And good afternoon to this honorable court. And I'd like to invoke the rule of sequestration. I think the witnesses are in the courtroom, so I would ask the court to excuse them as I begin.
Sure. So I don't know. I see three folks here. If you're going to be calling all three, one can stay if you've got a lead investigator, but others need to go out, and it's happened. So you are not Officer Colley?
He's my investigator for the office.
Oh, this is the DA's investigator. You don't need to go anywhere. Okay. Got it. So Officer Colley and a colleague, they've stepped outside. Okay, great.
All right, great. So, Your Honor, may I keep my seat, Your Honor?
You may.
All right, thank you. So, Your Honor, what is going on from our understanding regarding this September 12th, 2020 incident is that there was a 2-page, 2 to 3 page police report, and the police report basically laid out that there was an extra job being performed by Officer Colley in that he observed Mr. Sims not wearing a seatbelt, and then the encounter began. So after I asked for dash cam, asked for body cam, didn't have that initially, I received an email from the prosecutor indicating that, well, it needed to be clarified in terms of what was going on with this traffic stop. And according to the email that I received from the prosecutor, that it was a checkpoint. So that was stated in the email. So that triggered a constitutional question with respect to whether or not this was a valid checkpoint under our current law. And I particularized the motion and led in that direction that this was not a valid constitutional checkpoint. And with that language being the case, then there would have been a requirement by the city of Atlanta to meet certain criteria in order to effectuate a checkpoint encounter between themselves and private citizens.
Okay.
So that's where we are.
Okay. So I'm clear. Your contention is not that there was anything constitutionally suspect about Officer Colley approaching Mr. Sims in his parked vehicle. That would have been fruit of the poisonous tree, maybe. The problem was the checkpoint. The problem was how it was constituted. Was it officially sanctioned? Whatever we're going to hear the evidence is, and then you can make your argument. But it's the checkpoint that would be the stumbling block for the state, not whatever encounter Officer Colley and maybe Officer Miles had with Mr. Sims. After that, your point would be there shouldn't have been an encounter because there shouldn't have been this particular checkpoint. There was something wrong with this checkpoint.
That's essentially correct, Your Honor, because I believe that that particular critical aspect of the encounter needs to be overcome first. And once the officer gets to the car, now we're just dealing with the subjective aspect of the nose.
Sure.
Whether or not he smelled what he claimed.
Well, we'll get the testimony, but as I understood,
that's correct.
your understanding of the facts, and we'll get the actual facts or this rendition of them from these officers. The way the second part of the encounter played out probably passes muster under the state of law in Georgia. If an officer, set aside the checkpoint, if an officer just happened to be walking through the parking lot at Etheridge Apartments, like, I smell marijuana, is coming from Mr. Sims's car. Hey, I'm smelling this. Could you step out of the car? I'm getting out of the car. I don't remember the basis for the search, but the scent could be the basis for the search. They find things in your client's car. They seize them. If that was the totality of the facts, you could still argue a motion, but if I found the officer's testimony to be credible, I don't know that it would be a successful motion. Your point is not that's where the error occurred. It's this checkpoint.
That is correct, Your Honor.
Okay.
And of course, once we get to the smell part, obviously the state will have to establish foundational aspects
Sure.
of that. But yes, Your Honor, the court is correct as it relates to the point of the motion, which deals with the checkpoint.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Ms. Charles, anything you want to add? Are you ready to call your first witness?
I would just like to add, Your Honor, when I first spoke to Mr. Matthews on or around April 4th, we clarified a few things.
Excuse me, I need Ms. Charles to get closer.
The mic is off, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes, when I spoke to Mr. Carrington on April 4th, he had informed me that he had not received the body camera in this case. I had to do some digging, and we later found out that the body camera had been uploaded to a different case number. We located the body camera and we disclosed that to Mr. Matthews. Mr. Matthews and I discussed the brevity of the officer's report. I spoke with the officer, and his words, when in full transparency to Mr. Matthews, was he was doing a safety checkpoint, which is what I relayed to Mr. Matthews. Later, in clarifying with the officer, he explained to me that was sort of verbiage that, that was just his way of speaking, but he explained to me what he essentially was. He was in his parked vehicle, fully marked APD vehicle in APD clothing. He noticed a traffic violation. He activated his blue lights, followed the vehicle, and effectuated a traffic stop, which led to the discovery of the contraband. I sent Mr. Matthews an email explaining further, this is what I expected the officer to testify to, that the legal definition of checkpoint was not what was in the officer's mind when he explained that to me. And I hadn't heard back from that second email, so we're here now.
Got it. And it may well be, I now understand the basis for the motion. And it may well be after we hear from the officers that Mr. Matthews, well, that's actually not something that would qualify as a checkpoint such that it needs to meet all the criteria. And he cited just the right case, because I've had a couple checkpoint cases. But the case of Brown versus State, 293 Georgia 787, was now Chief Justice Namias's pretty clear explanation of here's how they need to work. And if they don't work that way, that's a problem for the state.
Absolutely.
But what we may learn, and I think this is what you're saying, is it's not that kind of checkpoint. That was the word that was used, which causes Mr. Matthews' antennas rightly to go up.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute, checkpoint. This doesn't sound like it was a checkpoint. So I appreciate you clarifying that. Let's see what your officers have to say. And I'm not going to rule from the bench, suppress, not suppress, but I'll certainly give you all a sense of, having heard all this, I actually don't think it's a checkpoint case, but it may, because we're exploring it, turn out to be. But the officer said, I don't know the difference between marijuana and roses, but I still feel like I smelled marijuana. Then there could be different issues that come up. So let's explore it. But I'll be on the lookout for what was meant by the term checkpoint.
Yes, Your Honor.
So who's your first witness?
Your Honor, I would like to call Sergeant Colley. It's joining the Zoom, so I'll be able to share my screen.
Okay. So it's now Sergeant Colley.
Yes, Sergeant.
And whoop, your computer. You got it muted?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Still muted?
I am. Haven't.
Yeah, you are. That's good. Before we swear the sergeant in, just so we have maximum audibility for Ms. Rivers, because you are sometimes soft-spoken, Ms. Charles. If you're going to be standing, you need to be near one of the microphones while you're asking Sergeant questions. So
Sure.
if it's going to be at council table, be near that. Otherwise, please be at the podium, because it's easier to be near the microphone there.
It's easier to manipulate my laptop. To
That's fine.
some
Just,
video.
you got to be belting it out.
I will.
Other thing before we get started, are you Officer Miles? Were you planning on calling him too? Okay. Thanks. All right. Sorry, Sarge. Didn't mean to keep you standing there. If you'd swear him in, please. And Sergeant, before you do that, if you're comfortable with it, I'd ask you to remove your mask so we can hear you as best as possible. And the microphone is actually really strong, but it's really sensitive. So if you would bend it so it's near you, and that chair has no wheels and it weighs about 100 pounds. So you may need to pick it up to move you closer to the microphone, but I need you to be within 3 or 4 inches of that microphone for us to hear you. Now I'll hear you just fine, but the court reporter needs to hear you.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, now if you would state your name, spelling your last name for the record.
Cyrus Colley, Colley.
Perfect. Ms. Charles?
Thank you, Sergeant Colley, for being with us today. Can you please state your current occupation?
Sergeant with the Atlanta Police Department,
And how long have you worked for the Atlanta Police Department?
12 years.
Are you post-certified?
Yes,
Were you post-certified on September 12th, 2020?
yes.
As a post-certified officer, could you tell me generally what your duties include?
As a post-certified officer, whichever agency that you're hired with at the time, you go out and enforce traffic laws, enforce anybody that's violating any criminal law, making arrests, things of that nature.
And is it your only occupation to work for the Atlanta Police Department, or do you have a second job?
I have a second job,
And who is that, what job with? Who do you work for?
Preservation Partners,
And how long have you worked with that?
6 years.
And what are your duties as the second job?
So they hire us to be the post-certified officers for any criminal activity on the property that we can address that their security cannot address.
Okay.
For example, making arrests that security cannot make an arrest for.
Okay. Let me direct your attention to September 12th, 2020 at approximately 5 p.m. Where were you at the time?
Roland Ben's apartment complex.
Let me ask you a quick question, Sarge. This extra job you're describing, that you are not on the clock with the city of Atlanta. You are post-certified, you may be in full uniform, but it's not an extension of your official duties as a police officer when you're providing security or additional security at one of these apartment complexes.
Well, it is. So we're not on the clock for the actual department, but we still have our rights.
Oh, I understand. You could on a weekend at a movie theater arrest someone because you're a post-certified officer. But the time you are at, I think we're going to be talking about Etheridge Courts or someplace near there in this case, when you are there through Preservation Parks, whatever you called it, your sergeant, back then you were an officer, your sergeant isn't saying, now relocate to this place. You are not on that kind of clock.
No.
You're not on duty.
No, not actual duty. I'm off duty working for them.
Okay. That's a better way of putting it.
Sergeant Colley, I have here a aerial view of the area that you said that you were on September 12th, 2020. And I have 4 magnets I'm going to hand to you. Are you able to, using the magnets, position where your car was located at the time of the encounter?
Yeah, I'm going to object to this particular exhibit. I haven't seen the exhibit, and there's not been established a foundation as to what this exhibit is by the witness.
Okay. Why don't you ask Sergeant a few questions about what this picture is and whatnot? The fact that Mr. Matthews hasn't seen it, probably should have seen it before, but I don't think it's particularly controversial what it is. And Mr. Matthews, you are welcome while this is happening to relocate so you can see things better too. Why don't you just bring it over to him for a second, and then Ms. Charles can ask Sergeant Colley about.
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome.
Sergeant Colley, what are you looking at here?
It's a view of the apartment complex, the C and D side of the apartment complex.
And when you say apartment complex, which apartments are we talking about?
Talking about Etheridge. It's 2 sides to Etheridge. You have the 2500 Center Street side, and then you have the Etheridge side. But they're all run together. So it looks like 2 different apartments, but it's same name, same person that owns it, but it's 2 different sides.
And that's that Preservation Park?
That's Preservation Park.
Okay.
Yes.
This area accurately depicts how it looked on the day when you encountered Mr. Sims, or where you were on the day that you encountered Mr. Sims.
Yes.
So going back to my original question, are you able to, using the magnets that you have in your possession, position where you were initially before you first encountered Mr. Sims?
Yes.
And Mr. Matthews, just in case you want to perfect your objection or renew it, I view this as a demonstrative aid. It's not something that will go into evidence because it's being altered by the magnets going on it. Certainly you'll be able to use it with the witnesses as well.
Agreed. Thank you.
Okay.
And my initial
So,
contact.
you'd like to place the magnets where you were when you first met?
Ms. Prosecutor, if you could, if it's okay with the
Sure.
court and you, can we put the demonstrative facing out?
Yeah, if you lean it against the wall of the jury, then that way Mr. Matthews and Mr. Sims can see it. I can see it just fine. And the
you.
sergeant's right there.
Where did you just place that car?
That's the patrol car on the side. That's where we normally set our patrol cars at when we're there because of the high crime that's at the store. So we're able to monitor the traffic that's coming into the location from City Street and also the crime that's at the store location.
And what store is that?
That's the store. I don't know the actual name of it, but that's the store. It has no name on it. That's the store that the community goes to.
Is it a particular color? I'm familiar from cases. There's the green store. Okay, I know the green store. Okay.
And how long have you been parked there? Do you recall?
I'll give it probably about 30 to 40 minutes.
And then you had an encounter with Mr. Tyler Sims. Where did you first observe Mr. Tyler Sims? Did you use the magnet place that?
I observed him driving on the road. That's why I observed him driving there.
And what's the name of that city street you just placed the car? Center Street.
Sim or Center? Center Street. Okay. And how is it that you're in APD patrol car working your extra job? Why would the city not need that for on-duty officers to be out and about?
So because of the high crime that's there, the chief authorized blue lights and also patrol cars being that area because the crime resistant.
And it's not just blue lights, as in you've got a light bar on top of a car that simply says security, but it's an actual APD vehicle.
Yes, by law, 4-inch decal on each side of the blue lights that's fixed at the top of the vehicle.
Okay.
Sergeant Colley, what happened once you saw that car?
So as the car is entering from the city street, I observed an infraction, which was a seatbelt that come to my attention. At the time, because the store is so busy, I tried to turn around to conduct a traffic stop because the vehicle was coming into the property. But he's coming into the property from the city street, he has to go down into the property through a gate that's broken, it's automatically open, right? So he goes inside and he goes into a parking spot. And I'm trying to turn around. There's so much traffic out that's right there in that store area. Takes me a few minutes to turn around. By the time I get there, he's on the other side of the Deedra, in front of Deedra.
So you're actually facing not the direction that magnet works.
This direction. Where the traffic right there.
Oh, look at that. All right.
And
So the vehicle that you're saying was Mr. Sims is actually coming nose to nose. You're not looking over your shoulder. It's coming right at you.
Correct.
Okay.
then you say you had to do a U-turn. So did you always maintain visual contact with this vehicle?
I lost contact once he got into the building. Once he got into property, it's only one way in and one way out. So I knew he went into the property. It's a matter of just finding where he went once I got back around to that side.
So where did you end up and where did you actually meet up with Mr. Sims?
Came into the property, went around. This is the way you come into the property. So this is the gate. He drives his vehicle in. He goes on this side and he parks about here. The magnets are backwards, so I want to put it backwards. He was actually pulled into the spot facing the correct way. I come around and I get behind him and I activate blue lights here while he's in the spot. And I'm behind his vehicle like that. His vehicle will be parked facing forward inside the parking space.
What do you recall what kind of vehicle it was?
Yes, it was a Dodge Charger.
Officer Sims, I'm so sorry. Sergeant Colley, you said that you were in full uniform that day, in your marked vehicle. Were you also wearing your body camera?
I was.
Was it operational?
It was.
Have you had a chance to review your body camera prior to today?
I have.
And I'd like to go ahead and.
So the Dodge Charger that you pulled up in front of with your blue lights on, it had come to a full stop. It was parked.
She parked in the parking spot.
So it wasn't a traffic stop where you blue light and all right, I'm going to pull over and you approach the person. Whoever was driving that car had already stopped by the time you rolled up.
Yes, Mr. Sims was already stopped. When I turned around to try to conduct a traffic stop, he was driving to the point I could not get to him at that point. So I was trying to conduct my traffic stop, but he had already pulled into his spot. I saw the infraction.
Officer, are you able to see the screen in front of you?
There's something in front of.
If you'll hit, got it. Great. And is it on your screen, Mr. Matthews?
Yes.
Well, should be everywhere and maybe even on the big screen. Good.
Officer, what are you looking at?
So that's the inside of a City of Atlanta patrol car of me getting ready to, looks like I'm getting ready to turn around at this point.
And
So this is footage, this is a snapshot of footage from your body cam. And it looks like that's the date. It's September 12th, 2020.
Yeah.
Okay.
and you said you had a chance to review your body camera.
Yes,
And what you reviewed reflects an accurate depiction of what happened in the entire camera system.
yes,
Your Honor, I'd like the entire body camera video is in Mark 6 Exhibit 8. It's on-
A or eight? Eight.
And the entire body camera was also turned over to defense. I'd like to move that into evidence and use certain parts of this body cam as subject quality continues his testimony.
Mr. Matthews, any objection to the admission for this hearing only of State's Exhibit 8?
No objection.
It's admitted, and just so we know, insofar as Sergeant Colley is able to say, these are snapshots from it, all the pictures, the stills from that you want to use are admissible because the whole video has been admitted.
Thank you. Officer, in addition to reviewing the body camera, do you recall speaking with me about this case in preparation for the hearing today?
yes,
Do you recall us discussing what exactly the nature of the second job had been?
yes,
Nature of the what?
The second job.
Oh, yes.
And do you recall me asking you what you had been doing that day on Center Street?
yes.
What did you tell me the nature of your actions were that day?
Safety checkpoint.
What did you mean when you said you were doing a safety checkpoint?
So safety checkpoint is when you have a area that's bombarded with crime that officers will sit in, and we would show presence by finding violators and conducting traffic stops.
Are you aware that the word checkpoint may have a different meaning?
Yes,
What is your understanding of the second meaning for the word checkpoint?
well, traditionally, people understand that as being a DUI checkpoint that Atlanta Police Department do not do every day like we used to. So it could be misconstrued as a DUI checkpoint versus just a traffic safety checkpoint.
What would be the differences of a DUI checkpoint versus a safety checkpoint in your understanding?
DUI checkpoint is when we're stopping every vehicle, finding violators to be intoxicated under the influence of alcohol or any type of controlled substance like a drug.
And what is the difference with just a safety checkpoint?
We only stop you when there is a violation of the law.
And so on September 12th, 2020, were you doing a safety checkpoint that someone would think would be a DUI checkpoint or roadblock?
It was a safety checkpoint.
But was it as if you were stopping every vehicle or you set up a roadblock at Center Street?
It could have looked like that because you have patrol cars sitting on the street, but that's not what we intended that for that to be.
So you were on the side of the street.
We're on the side of the road. We were not standing.
Hold on. There's an objection.
Just ask that she not lead the witness.
Okay.
So how was your car positioned?
My car was positioned on the side of the road by the grass area.
Were there other patrol cars parked with yours?
I was the only City of Atlanta patrol car working that day.
Was your view blocked or obstructed anyone?
My view was not blocked or obstructed.
Once Mr. Sims rode past you, what did you do next?
I immediately tried to make a U-turn to stop him.
Did you have your blue lights on?
Yes,
Did Mr. Sims eventually stop his vehicle?
he was already stopped in a parking spot by the time I got to him.
You're not allowed to play what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1.
Should there be audio or?
Audio,
There is audio. Officer, with the body camera, is there?
it is a delay. So the time that the audio comes in is once the camera is activated, but there is a 2-minute buffer that allows the viewer to see what's happening 2 minutes prior before the activation.
So you're making your U-turn now?
I'm making my
That's
U-turn now.
why the wheel is going crazy. Okay.
He's already went past me at this point.
Why does it seem like it's going in slow motion?
Regular speed on my
He is jumping over here.
But it's jumping
It's
on the big
faster.
screen.
Okay. I don't mind. I just want, you're not doing that.
No, I'm
That's our great lag.
That's
Okay.
right.
He was standing beside the car. Okay, okay.
So, officer, at this point, where are you?
We're in the front of the D building.
D or E?
D as in David.
Okay.
And when you stopped in front of the D building, what do you see ahead of you?
The vehicle with a driver inside that violated the seatbelt law on the city street.
You're gonna like to play now what has been marked as State's Exhibit 2.
Okay.
Prior to playing in its entirety, Sergeant Carly, what did you do once you saw the vehicle ahead of you? What did you do next?
I approached the vehicle to talk to the violator to see what was the reason for the violation. I think it's on.
So if you'll pause, your computer can be on mute, but if you, when you were doing screen share, had clicked the little box that said, I don't remember if it says stream audio or share audio.
How are you? I'm Sergeant College, City of Atlanta Police. I understand why I'm talking to you today. You don't have a seatbelt on driving on the city street.
I thought y'all really had a roadblock right there, so I really
No roadblock. You're sitting there. You don't have a seatbelt on. Any reason why?
I took it off to actually pull my ID out. I thought y'all had
You got a driver's license on? This your car?
Yes, sir.
What is your old police car?
No, not really, but it is good.
Okay, no worries.
Okay, employees, location, no weapons. Sponsor, here's the reference to Richmond. Color's gonna be a black female and a black romper standing inside.
Hey, come to a D building. I got a traffic stop. This car smells like straight marijuana. Yeah.
So, Sergeant Colley, After you approached Mr. Sims and explained the reason for the stop, you got back into it and you made a call. Who did you call?
Security Officer Miles.
Why did you call Security Officer Miles?
Based off me working there for 6 years, I've gotten into several fights, and it takes sometimes the patrol units that's on the street a minute to get there. So I'll call the security there first and then start calling other additional help if I needed it.
So Officer Miles is an Atlanta police officer working an extra job like you, or he was on duty when you called him?
Officer Miles is a security officer that works for a private security company.
He's not a police officer.
No,
He would be the security officer or a security officer for Etheridge Court Apartments.
yes.
From the area where the car had stopped and where your car had stopped, according to the body camera, is the view clear from the Etheridge Court's apartment back to Center Street where you were originally?
No, you can't see up there from where we are now.
So if you would park the Rolling Ben's apartment, just to confirm, you couldn't see.
Objection leading.
You're just overruled.
I'm trying to clarify that from the Rolling Ben's apartment, as you said, you're unable to see all the way down to Center Street to see if there had been a roadblock.
Well, you should ask him if he's able to, rather than, isn't it true? You didn't use those words, but to Mr. Matthews' point, you're suggesting the answer.
Yes, sir. Are you able, from Rolling Ben's apartment, to see down to Center Street?
No,
How would someone be able to tell that there had been a roadblock at Center Street?
Objection.
Well, it
Call for
wasn't-
speculation.
Can you ask that a different way?
Without driving down Center Street, would someone be able to tell there was a roadblock?
no. The view to that area is obstructed by buildings and trees.
Once you called Security Officer Miles to come to assist you, what did you do next?
When I called him to assist me, we went back to try to detain him based off the odor of marijuana that we smell coming from his vehicle.
Can we rewind that a little bit then? And I don't mean the video. You, on your call to Miles, said something about, it sounded like street marijuana, something
I
marijuana.
said straight marijuana.
What's straight?
Well, it's no term. It's just what I use to them. Hey, we've got a lot of marijuana over here. I
Okay.
can tell
All
by
right.
the aroma of it.
And you encountered that aroma when, during your interaction with the person who we all saw in the video seated in the car?
Yes.
But my question is when you
Oh.
walked up, you had to stick your head in there?
I want to say when I was going towards the vehicle, I could smell it as I was talking to him.
Sergeant Colley, was the windows rolled up or down when you pushed the car?
They were down.
And I'd like to play what's been marked as State Exhibit 3.
Hi.
Can you run a tag at Oil In? Oil In is going to be 051-926-701. And also a Georgia tag, Robert X-Ray Queen 5905.
Am I? How you do 15? Good. Your van is going to be out of Florida. It's a 2000 Nissan light color, registered to Benito Rodriguez of Gotha or Gotha, Florida. Trying to tag number is out of Florida.
Traffic stop. Going to be on a Georgia tag, Robert X-Ray Queen 5905. It's going to be on a gray Dodge Charger occupied one time. I paid $2,500.
Sergeant Cully, what were you doing at this point?
So at this point of the traffic stop, I'm calling it in to our dispatchers and running the information that's available to me at the time, which is its tag information.
I'd like to play what's in Marcus State's Exhibit 4.
What you stepping me out for?
I'm gonna step you out for a second and I'll tell you everything about it.
I've paused State's Exhibit 4 at the 6-second 88 mark. Sergeant Colley, at this point, what are you doing?
So we're trying to detain him based off the aroma of marijuana that we smell inside the vehicle.
And was that Officer Miles
Yes.
in the fatigue colored clothes who had shown up?
Yes.
Okay. The person that we see on the screen right now, is that someone you knew from before, or this is your first, as far as you can recall, your first encounter with
This
this
is my
person?
first encounter.
Okay,
And
stranger to you.
I've never seen it before.
Okay.
And Judge, I'm going to object to part of the witness's response. He said that this is, he said that we smelled the marijuana, and I only, at this point, based upon the evidence and the testimony that I've heard, I think it's Officer Sergeant Colley who's indicated that he smelled marijuana.
Okay. You can cross him on that. I think you're right, but I don't think that's an objection so much as he's maybe expanded the universe in a way that doesn't fit. We'd have to hear from Officer Miles on that.
Sergeant Colley, what is your basis for knowing what marijuana smells like?
Based off my knowledge, training, experience of 12 years, there's 3 different types of marijuana that I've encountered: burnt, burning, and raw. And his vehicle smelled like a burning and a raw smell of marijuana.
28, Plea,
Step out.
What's going on?
You're gonna step out.
You're not asking what's going on
I'm
before
gonna
you
ask you one
pull
more
out.
time. Step out before I pull you out of the vehicle.
I'm just asking you what's going on.
I'm gonna tell you. I said, give me 1 second.
Plea, Baker.
Appreciate it.
1053.
1053, go ahead.
Georgia Tag is a 2018.
So, why your car smell like straight marijuana?
I had just got through smoking a blunt, but just being honest with you.
Okay, so that's why I'm stepping you out, because your car smells like marijuana. Very strong.
I just got through smoking a blunt, just being honest.
You got you smoking?
Yeah.
You got some marijuana in the car.
I got a blunt right now.
All right, I'm gonna sit you in the back of this car for a second.
Okay. Right.
For the record, I'm stopping this video at 1 minute and 12
Is that it
seconds.
there? No, that's
Sergeant
not it.
Colley,
It was another.
once you inform Mr.
Okay.
Sims about the smell of the marijuana, what did he say to you?
He had just got through smoking a blunt.
What did you do next?
We put him in the backseat of the patrol car. Let me double lock. You got your key, or you don't have a key? I just have seen it. Wait a minute. Hold up.
For the record, I've stopped the video at 1 minute 41 seconds. Sergeant Colley, what are you doing at this point?
At this point, we're patting him down before we place him in the back of the car for officer safety at this point.
What was that black box you pulled out?
That was a scale that one would weigh drugs with.
Was that a scale?
Any more weed in the car?
Why not tell you
Sit down in the front.
So if you'll pause for a sec. It looks like there are a bunch of minutes left on this video. And I'm wondering if it is Sergeant Colley searching the car. I don't know that we need to watch all of it. I'm not trying. It's all in evidence. And if there's something in there that Mr. Matthews wants us to see because he thinks that the scope of the search exceeded the limits, we could go there. But this is now search incident to arrest. The car is going to be impounded. There are all sorts of proper legal bases for, assuming the stop was good, and I'm not saying that right now, but assuming the stop was good, Sergeant Colley is where he's authorized to be. So I don't need to watch the rest of the search of the car. Mr. Matthews is free to jump us to a point during his cross-examination. I'm mindful of the time. And so I think you can move to whatever the next phase of the encounter was.
Yes, Your Honor. Just go to the end.
I guess I should clarify though, Sergeant Colley, you now are searching the car incident to your arrest of Mr. Sims and your processing of the vehicle.
Yes, recovering the property that's inside of it.
Okay.
Sergeant Colley, what are you doing at this point?
At this point, we discovered edibles that are infused with THC, and we're recovering that out of the vehicle to take it back. And we also recovered a small plastic baggie. At the point, there was an unknown peel that was in a baggie that was tied with a knot at the top of it, just to figure out what that peel was and bring the edibles back to secure it in the patrol car.
What
kind of pills is these before I go test them?
My pills I have in my hand.
What kind are they before I dip them?
I think it was
Oxy?
not oxycodone. They was
Look up this number.
Oh, you said pill, not, I thought you said peel, like orange peel.
No.
You're actually, it was a pill, like an aspirin or an Oxy or a Xanax.
Right.
Okay, pill.
Yes.
That makes more sense. What doing with a peel?
Sorry, 6741 in crime.
At this point, how did you ascertain that it was oxycodone?
So we can look up the number that's on the pills and it'll tell you what type of narcotic it is.
Did you look up the number?
No,
Who looked up the number?
Miles did.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the, I guess, the extent of our motion far is limited in terms of what the state is going into now. I don't think all this part is necessary or germane to our legal issues that we have.
So why don't we take an evidentiary pause and see Mr. Matt, you've now heard, and I've heard a bunch more about what was the nature of the police presence near the family store, and then what resulted in the stop and how that stop proceeded. I agree with you. I think I've heard enough to be able to evaluate the concerns you had about, is it a checkpoint? Was it properly constituted, et cetera? I think I've heard a lot about, I don't know that we'd call it a stop, but there was a subsequent encounter. Well, we don't know yet. Someone had stopped the Charger and was sitting in the front seat. So there's a dot still connected. Who is that person we've seen on the video? But
Apart from the ID part, I think
you've heard what you need to hear to litigate it, and what went on after that is not something you're challenging.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
You bet. And so, Ms. Charles, given that, you may have a few other questions you want to ask Sergeant Colley, I know I've got a couple depending on what you ask or don't ask, and then we can turn it over to cross-examination.
So just to confirm and to sum up, Your Honor, Sergeant Colley, you effectuated a search of the vehicle after you had taken the smell, which you had identified for your training as the smell of lemon marijuana.
I
Yes.
didn't understand the question.
Yep, back to the microphone.
Sergeant Colley, the reason for the search of the vehicle was the smell that you observed once you had approached the vehicle after the traffic stop. Is that correct?
I'm going to object. It's clearly a leading question.
I know
Sergeant
you're trying
Colley,
to summarize, but it needs to stay away from, isn't this what you said?
Yes, Your Honor. Sergeant Colley, why did you search the vehicle that day?
Searched the vehicle because I smelled the aroma of marijuana inside the vehicle. And we have an incident to a lawful arrest. So at this point, we're detaining an individual to further investigate.
Were you able to later identify the person seen on that video?
Yes,
Do you see that person in court today?
yes.
Can you identify this person? What is this person wearing?
I can't see. Everything is obstructed right
You're
now.
welcome to stand up, move around so that you can describe the person you think is the person who was driving the car that you stopped and detained.
White shirt, facial mask, white, blue facial mask.
Okay.
Let the record reflect that Officer Colley has identified Mr. Tyrone Sims was sitting in court today.
He has.
Officer, just to sort of circle back, what do you understand a blunt to be?
A blunt is a Swisher cigar that is sold in the store that you will cut open and take the tobacco out, and you will put marijuana inside that wrap, that tobacco leaf, and it becomes a blunt, which is a terminology that is used.
And the only reason that you came into the Etheridge Benz apartment that day was because you observed, what was the reason you followed Mr. Sims's car that day?
I'm going to object. It's been asked and answered.
We'll do it one last time. You can answer that question.
We were sitting on the city street. We noticed Mr. Sims riding past us onto the property. We noticed that he did not have on a seatbelt, and we tried to turn around to conduct a traffic stop and catch up to the vehicle.
Is that the royal we, or did you have a partner in the car that?
I'm saying, okay, let me rephrase that. Me.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. I just want to make, because I didn't see in the video footage.
I'm sorry. Well, when I say we, I work with the security, so I normally get them to try to help me out. But me, I stopped the vehicle.
Thank you, Sergeant Colley. No further questions.
You're welcome.
Mr. Matthews, questions for Sergeant Colley?
All right. Thank you, Judge. Sergeant Colley, you have been a police officer with the city of Atlanta for 12 years, correct?
Yes.
And it's your requirement as a police officer to prepare a police report in connection with arrests and investigations that you make. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you prepared a police report in connection with this particular arrest, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, you stated back on September 12, 2020, that you were working a second job, correct?
Yes.
This second job was, you were off duty, correct?
Yes.
Now, off duty, simply for the record, you were not at the time of this encounter with Mr. Sims, you were not on the clock with APD, correct?
No.
All right. And you were working in your private capacity, correct?
Well, I'm still working for the city because the city gives us the authorization to do it. We just working for a private company.
Okay. So the city gives you this authorization to do it, and you state it being to work in a private capacity, correct?
Yes.
And work at this particular location at the Green Store, Preservation Parks Apartments. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you have with you today any memorandum, any memorialization of the city authorizing you to work in the capacity that you did on this day?
I do not have any paperwork, not on me now that says that.
Do you have any documentation or paperwork that says that you can, well, let's back up. We're looking at this diagram here this is a blow up of a photograph that the state has introduced into evidence that you've been testifying from, correct?
Yes,
All right, and you placed some magnets on this diagram, correct?
yes,
On this picture, correct?
yes,
One being a police car diagram, correct?
yes,
The other being a private car magnet, correct?
yes.
This police car that you have here, it was an APD police cruiser, correct?
Yes,
You do not have any documentation that you can provide the court that says that you were authorized by APD to be in that police cruiser in your off-duty capacity, correct?
I don't have documents, but there is standard operating procedures that say we can.
Okay. And the court doesn't have that benefit today, correct?
No,
Okay. Now, you're working in your private capacity for the apartment complex, correct?
I'm working in the capacity of an Atlanta police officer.
Okay. But you're getting paid on September 12th, 2020 by the apartment complex corporation, correct?
Yes,
Okay. Your police cruiser, Sergeant Colley, was not on the private property of Preservation Parks at the time that you encountered Mr. Sims, correct?
it was not.
It was on,
And so the record's clear. I think I know because you're looking at it. When you say encounter, this would be Mr. Sims driving by, not the encounter of, hi, I'm Sergeant Colley. I need you to get out of your car.
that's correct.
Okay.
Let me clarify that question. When you initially saw the Dodge Charger, you were not on the private property of Preservation Park, correct?
No, I was on a city street.
You're on a city street,
Yes,
right? Okay. Now, you're on the city street, but is your testimony that Preservation Park Apartments pays you to provide an additional layer of security for their apartment complex, correct?
yes,
So they're paying you to be on a public street, is that correct?
they're paying me to be a police officer to protect the area that's around all of them.
Okay. Does the apartment complex, are they aware that when you parked on a public street, that you're also, well, let me back up. Would you agree, Sergeant Colley, that when you were parked on the public street, that you were working in your capacity as an on-duty officer patrolling that particular street?
We have an oath.
Well, hold on. It's a yes or no, and then you can explain.
Can you repeat it, please?
I'll be happy to repeat. Do you agree, Sergeant Colley, that when you were parked on the public street, that you were operating and controlling and patrolling the public street in your private capacity off-duty officer?
No,
So when you're on that public street and you were parked there and you were watching private citizens patrol up and down that particular street, you were not on duty with APD, being paid by APD, correct?
so you're asking two different things.
Let me,
You can explain, let him explain his answer so we don't go around in circles and then you can follow up.
So we have to still radio and clock in through the radio that we're working, but not getting paid. So I'm still working for the city, but I'm getting paid by them to come with the city of Atlanta's equipment and their police cars to work. So I still have to act as if I'm on duty if a crime is committed in my presence. I still have to act per oath.
well, I mean, as per the oath though, Sergeant, not to get into a long debate about this, but You can be with your kids in Walmart and not even have on a uniform and make an arrest because you're a sworn police officer, correct? If you see a crime in progress, right?
You can.
Right.
But I'm curious about this as well. You said something that I hadn't bumped into before. Because you're in the Atlanta police car and you're in full uniform, et cetera, on a public street, you've actually radioed in so that 911 dispatch, they know where you are and they know what you're doing. You are off duty in the sense that someone else is paying you, but you are in a city of Atlanta asset. And so if an officer was shot 6 blocks away, they could say, Unit Collie, go over there.
I would still have.
And you would say, you bet I'm going over there, even though you wouldn't say, I'm off the clock. I'm here for Preservation Park.
We still have to, if there's any infractions that are committed, we're still compelled to enforce that in an enforcement capacity due to us working for them and working for preservation partners. The city of Atlanta takes precedence over anything when we're off duty or working for a private entity. We still will have to act.
In contrast, if you're in Walmart with your kids and you see someone slip a pack of gum in his pocket and walk out, you could, hey, I'm a police officer, you need to knock it off. But you also could say, you know what, these things happen and it's too bad that kid's parents didn't take better care of him.
True. The only thing that I would have to do when I'm off duty is enforce anything of a felony that I'm held to a standard to enforce, not anything of a misdemeanor.
We need to pause for a second. Are the folks for the 4 o'clock plea out there? Because this lawyer is saying he needs to go pick up his kid. And so I need to engage them real briefly, not on the record of Mr. Sims's case, about timing. I'm sorry, Mr. Matthews.
No worries, Judge.
The thing before you took a little longer than I thought.
The scope of this motion is, all this motion is that if there was a privilege.
Mr. Cromwell?
Hey, good afternoon, Judge.
Hey, so it's not a motion for new trial hearing. It's a motion to suppress.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. And we will be done soon. We're not going to be done right away. Ms. Riley is on tomorrow's trial calendar. So it sounds like you're in a little bit of a scheduling pickle. I don't know when you think you need to leave.
I think, you know something, Your Honor, you think I have to get to Lovett by 6. If I can get to Lovett by 6, get my kid, I'm good. So,
Okay, well, let me ask Mr. Matthews, you have all the time you need. And so if we need to reschedule this, we will. I'm not thinking that the state needs to call Officer Miles, given what you're focused on. And there's no testimony that I've heard or evidence I've heard that Officer Miles, the private security officer, had anything to do with the checkpoint, whatever I decide checkpoint means. We saw from the video, his presence began after Sergeant Colley was engaging with your client, parked vehicles, et cetera. So I don't think we need to hear from him, but we can if you think it needs to happen. How much longer do you think your examination of Sergeant Colley will be?
About 10 minutes.
Okay.
15 at the most.
Okay. I think the answer is you'll make it to where you need to be by the time you need to be there. So let's keep everyone here because otherwise it's tomorrow morning. You'd rather do it today. All right. So if you have Mr. Abate primed and ready and you're ready to go, when we wrap this up, then we will shift directly to that.
thank you, Your Honor.
Thanks for your patience. I'm sorry, Mr. Matthews. I didn't mean to disrupt your flow.
No worries, Judge. We're good. So Sergeant Colley, we're back on the record, okay?
Yes.
Now, you had a conversation. Well, let me back up. When you're parked on the public street in the APD cruiser, you see this Dodge Charger traveling up the street, correct?
Yes.
And you agree that we just observed the video camera footage of your body camera and we saw the Dodge Charger, correct? We saw the vehicle, correct? We saw the windshields to the vehicle, correct?
We could barely see what was obstructed in the video.
We saw the windows to the Dodge Chargers. You walked up to it, correct?
You can see the back window, yes.
And
So I'm clear, you're shifting from, I don't recall any video of the Dodge Charger passing the stopped patrol car. The video I saw would be now the Charger is parked outside
right,
Building D. Sergeant Colley parks his car and gets out and walks towards it. That's what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
then I'm following you.
So I'm referring to Sergeant Colley. When you walked to the Dodge Charger, we saw the video that the state just showed us, and it showed that the windows to the Dodge Charger were tinted, correct?
I'll say the rear windows that I could see it on the video were tinted.
Okay. And
Your Honor, may I object to this line of questioning that the tints on Mr. Sims's windows and sort of goes beyond the scope of what's been particularized in this motion?
well, it's just going.
But Mr. Matthews isn't going to go where he goes. What I am sensing here is how well could you see a seatbelt violation if the windshield was super dark and the windows were up and they were super dark? He's going to argue what he wants to argue, but I think that's a fair area to explore. If in fact the windshield was tinted, maybe the windows were down. That's what I thought the testimony was, is that as the car rolled by, the windows were down. But Mr. Matthews can explore that.
You agree that the Dodge Charger, that the windows were tinted on that vehicle, correct?
At the time of the stop, all windows were not tinted.
At the time of the stop, all windows to the vehicle were
So
not,
the windshield was not tinted.
was the passenger side window and the driver side window, were they tinted?
Yes.
Were the rear window and the rear passenger side and the rear driver side windows, were they tinted?
Yes.
Okay. And those tint on those windows were very dark, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, your police cruiser does not have a dash camera availability on this particular vehicle, correct?
No.
Okay. So we would not be able to see the approach of the Dodge Charger when you're saying that you did not, when you're saying that you saw the driver not wearing a seatbelt, correct?
Correct.
All right. You then turn your vehicle around and do a U-turn, correct?
Correct.
But before we get to all of that, in your report, you stated that you were working an extra job at 2500 Center Street, correct? That's in your report, right? Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, in your report, you stated that you saw a silver Dodge Charger traveling down Center Hill without having a seatbelt on, correct?
Correct.
You did not say in your report that you observed the driver of a silver Dodge Charger traveling down Center Hill Road without having a seatbelt on, correct?
Can you say it one more time for me?
Sure. You did not state in your report that you observed a silver Dodge Charger whose driver, the driver of the silver Dodge Charger, without having a seatbelt on, correct?
It's not in, yes.
I mean, I'll be happy to show it to you.
Sure. Please.
Yes, I did.
You may.
I can take an opportunity to look at it and ask you some questions.
Okay.
See it?
Yes.
As reviewing your report sufficiently, refresh your recollection as to your report.
Yes.
Okay,
Just that I didn't read the whole report. I just saw the portion that you asked. questions.
okay. And your report, you prepared that report sometime around September 12th, 2020, correct?
Yes.
And this is your report, correct?
Yes.
And these are your words, correct?
Yes.
And no one else prepared this report other than you, correct?
Correct.
All right. And in your report, your words that you typed up in your report and put together was that you observed a silver Dodge Charger traveling down Center Hill Road without having a seatbelt on, correct?
Correct.
You did not say that the driver did not have a seatbelt on, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Sound like a grammar or something was missing from the report.
Now, you also had a conversation sometime in April of this year with the prosecutor, Ms. Charles, correct?
I can't recall the day, but I have had a conversation.
Right. Prior to today, you were contacted by the prosecutor and y'all had a conversation about the nature of this particular stop, correct? And you stated to the prosecutor that you were conducting a checkpoint, correct?
Traffic safety checkpoint.
All right. In your report that we've just talked about, and I've shown you, nowhere in your report do you indicate that you are conducting a traffic safety checkpoint, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, in the Atlanta Police Department manual, well, let me ask you, can you reference in any police officer manual with APD a safety traffic checkpoint being an official authorized event that APD does?
It is. A sergeant can only authorize to do that.
All right. And you were not a sergeant on September 12th, 2020, correct?
I was.
Did you authorize your own checkpoint?
I can.
Did you?
Yes,
Who authorized it on this day?
I did.
Did you memorialize it in some type of log that you can show the court that on that particular date, you authorized your own safety checkpoint event?
No, that's not one we even do, even when I do authorize one for my officers.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's not, do we understand what a checkpoint is?
Well, I'm asking you some questions about it. As far as checkpoints go, it's no reference to a checkpoint at all in your report, correct?
No.
And would you agree that if you were conducting a safety traffic checkpoint, that you would have put that in your report, correct?
No, I never have.
You have never placed in your report what event you're performing when you are encountering a private citizen and making an arrest?
No, whatever we encounter is what we put into the report. Traffic safety checkpoint is just basically officers in the area just surrounding the area of crime. And that's what that is. It's not nothing that we reference. And there's nothing standardized that says this is how we have to operate and handle that.
Okay, so there's no standardized checkpoint or official event that APD has in its manual
No,
with respect to a safety traffic checkpoint.
not that I've read.
Okay, so where does that terminology come from?
That's just what we use when we have high crime areas. We say, okay, we're going to do a checkpoint, just do right around for violators.
Okay,
It's no different from us doing a seatbelt operation or something, checking for seatbelts or checking for people that's speeding that we would send our traffic unit to.
okay, so in this event on September 12, 2020, you state you're working an extra job, but here in court, you're saying that you were conducting a safety traffic checkpoint.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm curious, Sergeant Colley, you're working this extra job, you're getting paid by Preservation Park, but you are parked in an APD officer cruiser on a public street looking for seatbelt violators. How can you be doing two of those things at the same time on being paid privately, but doing something in a public capacity as a police officer?
I'll let, you can try to answer that one, but we are now circling back, sort of like you pointed out, the state was circling back because you flagged, hey, private job, public service, what's really going on here?
Yeah, sometimes the answers are just kind of take me back in another location based on his responses, Your Honor.
Okay.
So and I want to make sure I'm clear. You said, how could I work the private job and also work traffic seatbelt tickets? Well, I never said I was working traffic C. I said a traffic safety checkpoint, which we're looking for violators. So whether that is somebody coming through with a busted windshield, whether someone coming in with a headlight out, we're going to stop any violator of the law. So it's not specific to any type of law that we're looking for.
If I drove by in a car with no broken windshield, I was wearing my seatbelt, would I have been, and I wasn't speeding, and there wasn't marijuana smoke billowing out of my car, would you have stopped me?
No.
All right, so this particular checkpoint that you were, the safety checkpoint that you were performing, you don't check all vehicles.
Whatever infraction, or let me clarify, whatever state law that is broken at the time, that's what we address.
Okay.
So if there's no law that is being there's a violation, there is no stop.
Were you outside of your, were you standing outside of your car when you observed the Dodge Charger initially approach?
I can't recall. I want to say maybe, I don't know at the time.
Did you have your body camera working at that particular time that you?
Yes. So the body camera does not record continuously. There's a 2-minute buffer of what happens with the citizen and the officer encounter once he activates that body camera.
So you have to activate the body camera?
Yes.
So your body camera was not activated at the time that you observed the alleged seatbelt violation, correct?
It was not.
Okay. Now, you turn around, you go into the apartment complex. You then, there were some minutes that had passed before you actually encountered the Dodge Charger, correct?
Correct.
All right. And the Dodge Charger, Mr. Sims made a statement to you when you asked him whether or not he understood why he was being stopped, or you knew he had not had on a seatbelt. He stated to you certain things, correct? In response to that statement that you made or question that you presented to him, correct?
Correct.
And he stated to you that he removed his seatbelt in order to get his driver's license, correct?
That's not all correct.
Okay. He stated to you that he was not wearing his seatbelt because he was reaching for his driver's license. Isn't that what he said on the?
What he did say was he thought it was a checkpoint. And the reason why he took his seatbelt off was because he was going for his ID. That's
Okay.
what he said.
Okay. So in his mind, according to his words to you, and even according to your testimony here today, your words were it could have looked like a DUI checkpoint, correct?
He could have.
Okay. And Mr. Sims, even by his own response that we heard, thought it was a checkpoint, correct?
Correct.
In fact, his words were, I thought y'all had a roadblock, correct?
Correct.
His next statement was, I took it off to get my license, correct?
Correct.
When you encountered, now we're at the parking space. You later learned that Mr. Sims actually resided in the apartment complex, correct?
Correct.
All right. So he had a right to be there, correct?
He does.
He wasn't a detour from a perceived checkpoint, correct?
Correct.
But you told the prosecutor, when you talked to the prosecutor back in April, that what often happens is when officers observe a moving violation and attempt to stop a vehicle, that vehicle would go past them and pull into the parking lot of the nearby apartment complex. You remember telling the prosecutor that?
Yes. Yeah.
But that wasn't the case with Mr. Sims. He actually lived in the apartment complex, correct?
He did live in the apartment complex.
He was going home, right?
Did you know that at the time, or you learned only after you got information from Mr. Sims that he was a resident there?
I learned that after the fact. I got his ID.
Now, when you walked up to the car, Sergeant Colley, the Dodge Charger, Mr. Sims's driver's side window was down, correct?
Yes.
And we also observed that he was smoking a cigarette, correct?
Correct.
And that was a burning cigarette, correct?
Correct.
A burning cigarette that emanates smoke from tobacco, correct?
Yes.
And it was, your sense was that that particular cigarette being smoked at the time you approached was a tobacco cigarette as opposed to a marijuana cigarette?
No. So I could smell the like the aroma of a cannabis bud that had been burnt. So I can smell that because it's overpowering the cigarette.
Okay, and I didn't ask my question well. I wasn't, and Mr. Matthews may go there, but my question was the thing we saw in Mr. Sims's hand, your perception of that particular burning item was that that happened to be a tobacco cigarette. I'm not saying, did you confuse the two smells? Or did you perceive what was in Mr. Sims's hand to be a blunt?
No, I saw that to be a cigarette and I could see that he was smoking a cigarette.
Okay.
Okay. And he was smoking that cigarette inside his car, correct?
Correct.
So you would agree that the smoke that was emanating from the cigarette was compiling inside the automobile, correct?
No.
Well, it was only being released from the vehicle after the window was rolled down, correct?
The window was rolled down prior to me arriving to the vehicle.
Well, the window was rolled. You only knew that the window was down when you walked up to the vehicle, correct?
Yes, I saw it down.
And you don't know how long it had been down, correct?
No.
Okay. So it's safe to say that you definitely smelled cigarette smoke when you walked up to Mr. Sims's vehicle, correct?
No.
So you did not, so with your nose, you did not smell, you saw, well, back up, I apologize. You saw a burning cigarette in Mr. Sims's hand, as we've already talked about, right?
Correct.
And you saw the smoke, correct?
Correct.
But you didn't smell the cigarette smoke. Is that your testimony?
No.
You smelled the cigarette smoke, correct?
I did smell cigarette smoke
Okay.
as well.
Mr. Sims never stated to you that he had smoked a blunt inside that car, did he?
He stated that he had just gotten done smoking a blunt.
Right. He never stated that he smoked a blunt inside the Dodge Charger, correct?
He never said it in that terminology, that context that you're
He
saying.
just simply said, I just got through smoking a blunt, correct?
Correct. And along with, it was inside the car still.
What was inside the car still? You saw a blunt inside the car?
He said the blunt was inside the car.
Did you see a blunt inside the car?
He had got done smoking, so it was, he had smoked the marijuana.
Did you see a blunt inside the car?
No, not at the time.
Okay.
Did you find one when you searched it?
No, it was a small roach at that point.
Meaning there was the remnants of.
Right.
You located a small roach inside the car?
Inside the cup holder piece that was there.
Okay. And did your body camera pick that up?
No.
Did you photograph it?
No.
Did you take it into custody?
No.
Now, so Mr. Sims never stated to you that he smoked a blunt inside the car. He never stated to you how long it had been before that he had previously smoked the blunt, correct?
No.
Okay. Did you locate any marijuana inside the car?
No.
Okay.
I don't recall at the time of it was 2 years ago. I don't really
Okay.
recall the marijuana piece.
Okay. And Just 1 second, Your Honor. So that I'm clear on this whole issue concerning the checkpoint, Sergeant Colley. The way that you're, Judge, I'm circling back.
You are, again.
It'll be very brief. It was your intention, Sergeant Colley, by positioning your vehicle on a public street to imply to drivers that it was a checkpoint, correct?
No.
Did cars pass you by that day without stopping, or did every car as it approached you stop?
Cars stopped. No, I'm sorry. Cars kept driving through. And traditionally on a checkpoint, there's more than one patrol car that you would go through, not just one.
Did the cars, when they approached you, they slowed down though, correct?
Cars kept just driving by.
Okay. They didn't, did any of them slow down?
I don't recall anybody slowing down.
Okay. How long had you been situated there?
I want to say 40 minutes.
I can't, you may have already answered this. Yes, Mark, patrol car, blue lights on while you were just parked there, or your blue lights you turned on after you saw Mr. Sims with no seatbelt?
I want to say my lights were on because I was in the side of the road, so I would not get hit.
Okay.
So you had your blue lights, they were on but not flashing?
Yes, so we can turn, I want to say we have cruise, so we have different modes of lights. So we have directionals, we have cruise, and then we have all of our light bars on. I want to say the cruise lights were on at the time because normally we sit with the cruise lights on the side of the road just for visibility if we're inside the roadway obstructing the street.
Okay. Okay. But just so that I'm clear, this was a, in your language, a
traffic safety checkpoint.
There you go.
Yes.
All right. No further questions.
Any redirect, Ms. Charles?
Yes, Your Honor. Police report, please. Thank you. Sergeant Colley, you were asked whether you called retrieving any marijuana from the search. Professionally, you were supposed to have professional recollection as to whether you called that search.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
She'll get back to the microphone. What was it you asked Sergeant Colley about whether he saw something?
I asked Sergeant Colley to have a look at his report to refresh his recollection as to what he recovered after the search.
Yes.
Sergeant Colley, what did you recover once you searched that Dodge Charger?
From my report, I recovered a small plastic baggie of marijuana, 3 baggies of gummy bears infused with THC, and 7 oxycodone pills.
How did you describe in the report the odor that you took once you approached the vehicle to strike?
Strong.
Were you in any doubt as to what you smelled that day?
No.
How can you be so sure?
I do it every day. And especially being trained on it and being at Etheridge, we come in contact with narcotics on the street. We know what the cannabis smells like.
When you submitted your report, did you submit your report on personal headed paper?
No, that's city.
So you submitted the report on Atlanta City? paper?
Everything is done that we do off duty is the same way we would do on duty. I would still have to take out my warrants through Fulton County. We'll still have to do our paperwork through the computer aided dispatch, which is our CAD terminal, whenever we make an arrest.
And when you are working the second job, are you limited to the area that you can patrol for safety violations or any crime?
I have citywide jurisdiction when I'm working for a private entity. And let me explain that. If anything happens while I'm on the way there, we get in the car, I have to act. If an officer called for help, that was a great scenario. I still have to act. I can't say I can't do anything because I'm off duty. You still have to act accordingly per SOP and standard of the post, training standard council that says we have to act even when we're off duty in the uniform capacity and working for a private entity.
When you were parked in the intersection of Tower Hill Street and Center Street, were you going to be there all night?
At that intersection?
Yes.
No.
So what do you do when you are working there?
So,
What do you do?
so they hire us because we, as police officers, post-certified, can exercise our rights to make arrests when security can't, do traffic stops to curb the crime that's inside the community.
So you move around
So
periodically?
we move around, yes.
Were you parked in a way that would impede the flow of traffic in any way?
No.
Would you have made a U-turn and driven into the Etheridge Port Apartments at the time you did, had you not noticed a traffic violation?
So just so I'm understanding you, you're saying would I have driven into the property if I had not noticed a traffic violation?
Would you have let that area, no laws have been broken that?
Not at that moment.
From the intersection, when you first noticed the violation to where you came to a stop, what is the distance? How close?
Ballpark, you don't need to say 311 meters.
It's a little distance from the front gate to the back. So it'll take you a couple minutes to get back there.
So not like 15 minutes away?
No.
20 minutes away?
No, I'll say probably about 3 minutes tops if I drove slow, or 2 minutes, if that.
Once you came upon that Dodge Charger, were there any other Dodge Chargers in the area at that time?
No.
Was there anyone else inside of that Dodge Charger once you approached the Charger?
No.
Was anyone else were you stopping every car that went by?
If there was a violation of the law, yes.
And again, once you approached the vehicle, were the windows up or down?
It was down.
What did Mr. Sims say to you when you approached?
He took off his seatbelt because he thought he was coming through a checkpoint to get his ID.
What was your response to that?
There was no checkpoint. He said checkpoint. I said there was no checkpoint there.
When you first approached Mr. Sims, why did you tell him you were approaching him?
He did not have on a seatbelt.
Those are the questions, Your Honor.
I've got a couple questions and we'll see if there.
He said roadblock. I'm sorry.
He did.
His terminology was roadblock. And I said there was no roadblock.
Okay. when you observed the Dodge Charger approaching you when you were parked in the police car outside the green store, how many occupants of the Charger did you see?
Saw one.
So in terms of who would not have been wearing a seatbelt, it would have been only the driver?
Only the driver.
And tell me how it was you were able to see the driver as the car was approaching you.
Okay, good. So I'm a traffic sergeant, so I deal with traffic safety laws all day. So when I'm sitting in my car, I can observe a driver driving from the opposite direction from me inside the windshield to see him without his straps on. Per law, you have to have while operating a motor vehicle in the state of Georgia.
But so I'm clear, through your windshield, through his windshield,
Yes.
not through your side window and his side window. It was a head-on visual that prompted you to register. There's no shoulder strap.
Right.
Okay. Those were my questions. Anything briefly on recross, or you've covered what you want to cover?
No questions.
All right. Thank you, Sergeant.
Thank you.
Given what I've said about Officer Miles, do you have any other evidence you want to present?
No, Your Honor.
I need Exhibit 8 because I need to get Exhibit 8 to Ms. Rivers. Mr. Matthews, do you have any evidence you want to present?
No, Your Honor.
All right, the evidence is closed, other than we'll get Exhibit 8. You don't need to tender the demonstrative because it's demonstrative. You can hold on to that, but don't lose it in case that's something that needs to be dealt with later. Do you want to make any argument as the movant, Mr. Matthews?
Yes, Your Honor.
Now's the time.
Do I open and close? Do I get that right or no?
I'll ask you some questions at the end. So yes, you'll get a chance to rebut anything you hear from
Okay.
the state.
Okay, thank you. So, Your Honor, the witness has testified in this case.
Oh, by the way, sir, you can stay right there if you want. You're welcome to, you can leave if they excuse you. Otherwise, you're welcome to sit around, and Officer Miles can come in if he's here with you. He's clear to go. Yes, sir.
So, Your Honor, Sergeant Colley, back in September 2020, was working this extra job. The extra job was with Preservation Park Apartments, is what I guess I believe is what he used, Park Apartments. So he's working this extra job, and he calls it a traffic safety checkpoint. He's working this extra job. He is in his capacity as a police officer. Police officers, we know, are always quote unquote police officers. So they never put their badge down. I get that part. But on this particular day, he was actually being paid by this apartment complex. He was working for the apartment complex, but he wasn't on their property. Where was he? Sergeant Colley was posted up in his police cruiser that's issued by the city of Atlanta on a public street. I guess somewhat out of the road, off to the shoulder. He's got somewhat of his blue lights. They're not flashing, but they're on. And he sees this car come upon him. He says that the person is not wearing seatbelts, that Mr. Sims is not wearing his shoulder strap. That's what he says he observes. It takes him about 3 minutes, or give or take, to get to the back of the apartment complex that Mr. Sims lives. He encounters Mr. Sims. The officer sees Mr. Sims with the cigarette in his hand. The cigarette is burning. Smoke is emanating from the cigarette. Mr. Sims is inside his vehicle, and the smoke is building up, but it's being released out of the vehicle as the window is rolled down. The officer says, "Hey, look, I smelled marijuana." Mr. Sims gets out. He says, "I smoked a blunt." He never says that he smoked a blunt inside the car. He never says how long it had been before he smoked the blunt. And there's no picture, there's nothing in the video that tells us that there was in fact a roach inside the vehicle other than the officer talking about it and testifying about it. We don't have the benefit of a dash cam or a body cam that shows the Dodge Charger approaching Mr. Sergeant Colley's vehicle. So we have to take Sergeant Colley as word that Mr. Sims was not wearing a seatbelt. However, we can also take Mr. Sims at his word. He says, I thought you all had a roadblock and I took it off to get my license. So we have this car, officer's car, working in a private capacity, getting paid privately, but really is doing APD work. He says that that's something that APD authorized. Court didn't have the benefit of any documentation that said that was authorized. We don't have anything from the apartment complex that says that, hey, look, I'm going to pay you guys. How much sense does that make? I'm going to pay you guys. I'm going to pay you, Sergeant Colley, to be on the public street looking for seatbelt violators. So I'm an apartment complex. I'm in corporate America. I'm paying a police officer to look for seatbelt violators. That doesn't seem like a very prudent expenditure of resources in the private sector. To me, the corporate apartment complex would be paying Sergeant Colley to protect its residents and those that come on to the apartment complex from crime. That he would patrol the area in his car, that he would get out of his car and walk the area so that he can make sure that there isn't any illegal activity going on the apartment complex. So I don't buy this notion that the apartment complex is paying Sergeant Colley to park the APD cruiser on a public street so that he can catch traffic violators. Doesn't make sense. It's a disingenuous argument. And I'm asking the court to not let that slip by. Now, checkpoint. It looks like a checkpoint. It smells like a checkpoint. It is a checkpoint. It's a safety traffic checkpoint, as testified to by Sergeant Colley. So what are they doing? They're bending, because we have no, he said there's no written protocol in the APD manual that says that we can do this, but we do it. If I understood his testimony, that it's not written anywhere, but we do these safety traffic checkpoints. So it's a checkpoint. That's what it is. It's a checkpoint. And the law says, Your Honor, that checkpoints have to be done a certain way. Now, if he was on the side of 285 or 85 or on some busy street and he had his radar gun and he was looking for speeders, then we all know that he is looking for speeders. But he characterized this as a checkpoint. And the law is very clear in Brown versus State, 2013 case 7, that the Georgia Supreme Court has identified 5 minimum requirements that a particular checkpoint must satisfy to be upheld as constitutional. A roadblock is satisfactory where The decision to implement the roadblock was made by supervisory personnel rather than the officer in the field. Sergeant Colley cannot have it both ways. He can't both be the officer in the field and the sergeant authorized it. He said he authorized it. He authorized his own safety traffic checkpoint. So that can't be the case. All vehicles are supposed to be stopped. He randomly stopped vehicles that I guess weren't wearing seatbelts. All of them have to be stopped. He didn't stop them all. And he didn't actually, this is a questionable stop. Mr. Sims had arrived to his residence. He just chose not to get out of his residence because he just chose not to get out of his car in that moment because he was in the car smoking a cigarette. But he was home. This clearly was not a roadblock operation that was well defined or well identified as a police checkpoint. So, in my estimation, Your Honor, this was not a valid checkpoint authorized under the Georgia Supreme Court case law that allows the government to randomly pull over vehicles that they believe are violators. You can't call it a checkpoint without it qualifying as a checkpoint, whether you want to call it a safety traffic checkpoint, a DUI checkpoint, a roadblock. We can give it all these different labels, but it still has to line up with what Georgia law requires. And here, Your Honor, I just don't believe what this officer was doing was constitutionally valid. He's working an extra job. And they're paying him to do a checkpoint, not to keep their property safe and secure by maintaining order on the property and keeping people safe from shootouts, keeping people safe from drug activity, keeping people safe from gambling, keeping people safe from robberies, keeping people safe from rapes that could occur in the apartment complex, keeping people safe from speeders in the complex who are not being attentive to children that are playing. Those are the things that you're paying these officers to do on their property. And he wasn't even on their property. He was operating as an APD off. He in fact radioed. He radioed into his colleagues that I guess he's set up over here on Center Street doing work. This is not a valid checkpoint, and I think it falls squarely within. He was behaving in a way that was a checkpoint by his own words, but it was not legal, it was not valid, and I'm asking the court to suppress this case, suppress the evidence that derived from this case. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Ms. Charles, you can respond in whatever way you want. If you'd start with, because I didn't get it all in my notes. Mr. Matthews is seeking to suppress basically the fruits of the search of the car. And you had Sergeant Colley, you refreshed his recollection by having him look at his report. I know that was the edibles. What were I think he said 3 things that he recovered. So please be near a microphone wherever you're going to be so Ms. Rivers can hear you. What was it that was recovered that would be suppressed if I granted the motion?
There was 7 oxycodone pills and a plastic baggie of unburned marijuana.
And edibles
And
with
3
THC?
THC infused edibles,
Okay.
confirmed by GBI as 47 grams.
And then a bag of raw marijuana.
In a bag of marijuana.
Okay. All right, take it from there.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, Sergeant Colley was very clear in my estimation in his testimony. He made it clear that while he was working a second job and while he was hired by this private company, he is a post-certified officer. The reason why he was engaged by this company was because he was an APD officer, and in his capacity as an APD officer, his visible presence was to deter crime. Sergeant Colley testified that he is not required to limit himself to one place. He is free to drive around the apartment complex. He's free to stop and park. His primary goal is to prevent crime, however that may happen, whether it's for a traffic violation or someone breaking and entering into the apartment. His requirement is to be a visible deterrent of crime.
Sure, I follow you on that. Let's talk about the checkpoint. Tell me
at the
why.
point where he parked his car at the side of the road with his blue lights on cruise control, it is no different, to use Mr. Matthews' analogy, of an officer parked on the side of 285. He is parked in his vehicle. He does not need authorization to do so. He is there by himself. There are no other officers with him, no other police car present. He is simply parked in his vehicle, looking out for any violator of the traffic laws or any crime. It may not be a traffic law. Sergeant Colley has testified he has never met Mr. Sims prior to that encounter. He has no bone to pick with Mr. Sims. He merely observed, as he'd been parked there for about 40 minutes, a Dodge Charger driving towards him where the driver did not have the shoulder strap. That is all he observed, which gave him reasonable cause to make the U-turn, blue light this car, and initiate a traffic stop. That was all he intended to do. When he approached the vehicle, as he testified, it is less than 3 minutes from the intersection to where Mr. Sims had ultimately parked. When he approached the vehicle, the windows were down. Mr. Sims said, "I thought you were doing a roadblock." That tells me Mr. Sims had driven past the car, so he knew the officer was there. Sergeant Colley said to Mr. Sims, "The reason for my stop is that you rode past me without a seatbelt." Mr. Sims responded, "I thought you were doing a roadblock. I took my seatbelt off to get my ID out." I cannot understand Mr. Matthews' assertion that Sergeant Sims, working in APD for so long, would put his license at risk to deliberately make up a reason to target Mr. Sims, follow him into the apartment, on what pretext? So Sergeant Colley's reason for being in the place at the time he was because he did observe Mr. Sims drive past without the seatbelt on. Once he approached the car, Mr. Sims, by his own admission, said, "I was just smoking a blunt. I was smoking a blunt." Sergeant Colley, in his training and experience, can identify the odor of marijuana, which is what he said. Right when he left the car, before the backup showed up, he said the car reeked of marijuana, which tells us that the odor was so strong that it overpowered any other smells that may have been present at the time as well. Sergeant Colley testified he understands the meaning of the word checkpoint within the meaning of Brown v. State. And he testified that is not what he was doing that day. And he understands the difference. He understands that his turn of phrase may be mischaracterized, but that's his turn of phrase because all he, in his mind, was, "I was parked looking for any violator of crime that day. I was not targeting a specific vehicle. It just happened to be Mr. Sims at that time." And therefore, it was not a checkpoint within the meaning of Brown v. State. And therefore, the stop of Mr. Sims was valid. And the search incident to arrest was valid because the odor of marijuana presented Sergeant Colley with enough probable cause to search. And then he discovered in the center console, the roach, the burned blunt, in addition to the oxycodone pills and the THC-infused gummies, all of which are violations of the Controlled Substances Act, Mr. Sims was illegally in possession of. Mr. Matthews wants the court to believe that Mr. Sims had just been parked in front of his house, smoking a cigarette, minding his own business, and Sergeant Colley just happened to ride by and come up upon him. That did not happen. Your Honor, has to with the credibility of all the testimony today, Sergeant Colley's body camera bears out his account of what happened. It clearly shows him when he activates, Sergeant Colley is moving his vehicle. As he said, he was doing a U-turn to go into the apartments. Like he testified, there's one way in, one way out, which is why he knew exactly where to drive, because he had temporarily lost sight of the car, but he knew if he kept driving that one way, he may well encounter that vehicle. Sergeant Colley did not know prior to following the Dodge Charger that Mr. Sims lived in the apartment. He learned that after the fact. So to say that he simply went home, that is not accurate, because that is not information that Sergeant Colley had at the time when he initiated his blue lights and effectuated the traffic stop. Sergeant Colley, again, his account is borne out when he radioed that in. He radioed that he had a traffic stop. And then he called for backup, because as he explained, that area is a high area of crime. He did not want to engage the person in the car any further without backup, especially since he was now going to initiate a search. He did not know what contraband or weapons or anything of that sort that he would come to find. So he did everything as per standard operating procedure. And the fact that he was engaged in a second job, he's a post-certified officer. He never loses his power of arrest. And if a crime is committed in his presence, he is entitled, he is authorized to take steps to bring that violator, under arrest. And Your Honor, I'd just like to draw your attention to Bailey v. State. There's 283 Georgia App 365, 2006. Just to sum up, Your Honor, it's well settled that seatbelt violations provide a valid basis for a traffic stop, and that the odor of marijuana in the vicinity of the car provides a probable cause, all of which line up with Officer Colley's testimony today. And therefore, we ask that you deny this motion to suppress and grant that the stop was valid and all of the fruits from the search come in as valid and legally obtained.
283 Georgia Appeals.
365.
365.
2006 is the year.
Got it. Thank you so much. Mr. Matthews, anything super briefly in rebuttal?
Sure. I just want to keep the court focused squarely on the issue of whether or not Sergeant Colley had set up a valid checkpoint. He referred to it as a checkpoint on the witness stand. It was referred to as a checkpoint in communications with the state prior to the day's hearing. It was communicated as a checkpoint when he testified to it. Mr. Sims perceived it as a roadblock. This is not a manufactured motion to suppress argument. He perceived it as such. The car was blue lighted. He had the blue lights on. It was an unauthorized checkpoint, is what it was. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you both for these helpful presentations. I will take this under advisement. I will issue an order soon because Mr. Sims is on the trial calendar and we need to figure out trial, no trial. Mr. Matthews, you were very candid with me that your advice to your client may well flow from how I rule on this, because this was the case you were more focused on than the other one, not meaning you weren't focused on the other one, but we had to work through this constitutional issue. So I'll get that order out, and then Ms. Nelson will reach out to the two lawyers to say, where do we go from here? Is this a plea or do we keep it on the trial calendar? It meaning both cases. There are two, I get that. But this was the one that had the motion we needed to work through.
Correct.
Okay, good. Then you all are free to go, assuming we still have the lawyers we need for Ms. Riley's plea.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. And I need Exhibit 8. Thank you. I don't know where 1 through 7 went. Oh, they were the individual. Got it. Okay. I think 8 will do it. Thanks. And pretrial, I see Ms. Jackson and Ms. Smithman, you have been on this for a long time. We're about to get to the point we need you. And I'm sorry that we are now running 1 hour and 19 minutes late. But I very much appreciate your presence because I want to make sure you don't want to hear what you have to add in connection with the matter we're about to hear. We don't normally go past 5 o'clock, so please don't give up on the McBurney division.
How you doing, Judge?
I'm well. I'm sorry to keep you on needles and pins in connection with you getting your daughter in time, but we will now focus solely on your case.
I've got Miss Riley. Miss Riley, you come up. Well, we're over.
You are going to be at that table over there, and hopefully Mr. Abate is nearby.
He's here. He's getting his stuff together.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. She brought the whole group, Judge. Okay. You can take your mask off.
So let's get on the record, and we may have to cover a couple matters before we dive into the plea. This is 20 SC 177167, State versus Felicia Riley. Ms. Riley is seated at counsel table with her lawyer. Mr. Abate is here for the state. And I just got word from Ms. Nelson that there is some frustration from Mr. Jeremiah's family. They're in New York and wanted to be here. This is something that's been set for a while. So Mr. Abate, is there something I need to do? The Zoom call is out there. What do you know about the Jeremiah family?
They have the Zoom link.
Okay.
It's been provided to them.
Okay, great.
I spoke to them last week. That my understanding they were going to do it by Zoom is what I told her.
Okay.
I'm not, that they're upset. I agree with that.
Okay. Can you slide over one so you are in front of the microphone?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. We will press on. Is this a plea to the charges as they are in the indictment, or is anything being reduced or null prossed?
It's a plea to the indictment, Your Honor.
Okay. Ms. Riley, the way this is going to work is that in a moment, Mr. Abate is going to put you under oath. Once you're under oath, you need to answer his questions truthfully and completely. If at any point during the proceedings, you're not following what's going on, you can't hear it, or it's going differently than Mr. Cromwell told you it would go, please stop us so that you and he can discuss, and either he can answer your questions or I can answer your questions. Will you do that?
Yes.
Okay, and you're welcome to remove your mask if you want to. You don't need to, but it's very important that Ms. Rivers, who is the court reporter but is remote, she needs to be able to hear your answers, okay?
Okay.
All right, when you're ready, Mr. Abate.
Yes, if you'll raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear and affirm that the testimony you're about to give in the matters pending before this court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay, you can put your hand down. Just make sure you speak real loudly into the microphone for Ms. Rivers. Could you please state your true, correct, and legal name for the record, please?
Felicia Francis Riley.
And Ms. Riley, are you at this time taking or under the influence of any alcohol, drugs, or medicine?
No.
And is there any medication that you take on a daily or regular basis that you haven't taken today that would affect your ability to understand why you are here in court?
No.
And how old are you, ma'am, and how far have you gone in school?
34. And the second question was,
How far have you gone in school?
oh, some college.
And are you able to read, write, and understand the English language?
Yes.
And do you understand that indictment number 20 SC 177167, you were charged with 1 count of homicide by vehicle in the first degree, a count of reckless driving, a count of following too closely, and the last count, count 4, speeding?
Yes.
And do you understand that you have the right to plead either guilty or not guilty to these charges? And if you pled not guilty or remain silent, you may receive a jury trial.
Yes.
And have you gone over with your attorney the rights you were waiving today by taking this plea?
Yes.
Okay. And do you need any additional time to discuss with your attorney why you're here today and the specifics of the plea?
No.
And are you satisfied with his services?
Yes.
And counsel, do you waive formal reading of the indictment?
We waive that.
Do you also waive any and all defects in the indictment, including any with respect to your client's name for the purposes of this plea?
We do.
And Ms. Riley, has your attorney advised you of the minimum and maximum sentence for each charge you were pleading guilty to?
Yes.
And did he advise you that for count 1, homicide by vehicle in the first degree, the minimum is 3 years, the maximum is 15 years?
Yes.
And then for counts 2, which is reckless driving, counts 3, following too closely, and count 4, speeding, did he advise you they're misdemeanors, so the minimum is 1 day, the maximum being 12 months?
Yes.
Do you understand that this is a negotiated plea of guilty, which means the state and your counsel will make a recommendation to the court jointly of the sentence of 10 to serve 1 with the balance to be probated for the global sentence. But the court does not have to accept or follow this recommendation, and the court can sentence you to the maximum on each charge and then run them consecutively or one after another.
Yes.
Do you understand that this plea may be used to enhance sentencing on other convictions in this jurisdiction as well as in other jurisdictions, including the federal courts?
Yes.
Do you also understand that if you are not a United States citizen, a guilty plea will affect your immigration status and will result in deportation regardless of any advice given to you by your counsel?
Yes.
Do you understand that there may be other adverse consequences as a result of this guilty plea conviction, just as they would be from a conviction following a trial?
Yes.
And do you understand that you waive any and all defenses by entering a plea of guilty here today?
Yes.
Do you understand that by pleading guilty, you're giving up the following rights: the right to trial by jury, the right to remain silent and to not incriminate yourself, the right to confront witnesses against you, the right to the assistance of counsel hired by you or court appointed if you were unable to afford an attorney at the trial of your case, the right to the presumption of innocence, the right to testify on your own behalf and to present other evidence, the right to subpoena witnesses and to compel the production of evidence, the right to have the charges against you proved beyond a reasonable doubt by the state of Georgia, and the right to appeal if convicted of these charges after trial. Do you understand that by pleading guilty here today, you are giving up or waiving all of those rights?
Yes.
And Ms. Riley, has anyone forced, threatened, or promised you anything to get you to enter a guilty plea here today?
No.
And is it your decision to waive these rights and enter a guilty plea because you're in fact guilty?
Yes.
And how do you plead to count 1 in indictment number 20 SC 177167, homicide by vehicle in the first degree?
Guilty.
And how do you plead to count 2, reckless driving?
Guilty.
And how do you plead to count 3, following too closely?
Guilty.
And how do you plead to the last count, count 4, speeding?
Guilty.
Is this guilty plea freely and voluntarily given with full knowledge of all the charges against you?
Yes.
And do you understand that you may only have a limited right to appeal this guilty plea conviction?
Yes.
And do you understand that you have only 4 years from today for a felony charge and 12 months from today for a misdemeanor charge to file what's called a habeas corpus petition, which challenges this guilty plea?
Yes.
And did your counsel explain to you exactly what a habeas corpus petition is?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, had this case gone to trial, the state would have been able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that on November 10th of 2018, it was approximately 3:45 in the morning. The defendant was traveling on South Fulton Parkway with her passenger, the victim in this case, Mr. Anthony Jeremiah. They were traveling down South Fulton. Ms. Riley was the driver, and while driving, she was going approximately 100 miles per hour she was going west on South Fulton Parkway. The speed limit or the maximum speed limit on the highway that she was traveling was 65 miles an hour. And as she was traveling, she ended up rear-ended, a maroon Ford Fusion that was being driven by Alexander Evans. And the force of the collision caused Miss Riley then to lose control and she kind of skid or traveled across the westbound lanes of South Fulton Parkway. When she did that, she went across the median, also into the eastbound lanes of travel. She then hit a second car that was being driven by Miss Jaquette, which is Jacquette Smith, who was driving a 2001 Buick LeSabre. And as she struck this vehicle, not being able to stop, it struck on the passenger side where Mr. Jeremiah was seated, and it caused the vehicle, upon the collision with the second vehicle, for Miss Riley's car to spin out of control and then to flip over the guardrail, that where she and Mr. Jeremiah, who were in the vehicle, finally came to arrest or stopping place. And at that point, South Fulton Police Department did respond. Medical intervention was attempted on Mr. Jeremiah, but as a result of his injuries that he sustained during the accident, he ended up dying, Your Honor. That's what the state would have been able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt had we gone to trial. Miss Riley has no felony convictions. She has some minor speeding tickets and I guess pleas over the last number of years. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing excessive. Miss Oakham, who was on the case prior to myself, extended an offer of 10 to serve 1 with the balance to be probated. That offer was accepted, and which is why we're here today. The family is very unhappy with that offer. I want to, in all candor to the court, Miss Oakham had spoken to Mr. Jeremiah's mother at one point. She was okay with the offer and actually requested that Miss Riley would not receive any prison time or additional time in custody. Miss Oakham explained to her that the lowest the state was going to go was 1 year as it pertained to the custody of Miss Riley that we'd be recommending to the court. Some months later, she had some time to think about it. Mr. Jeremiah's mother did, and decided that she felt that the offer was not one that she wanted to extend to Miss Riley. I explained to her that when an offer has been extended and accepted, the state is bound to make that offer to the court. But the court was not bound by that offer and could sentence Miss Riley as you saw fit, and explained to her that if she wanted to express dissatisfaction with the offer, she could do that during her victim impact statement. I've spoken to her 3 times in the last 3 weeks. I did indicate to her that this was on a May 5th trial calendar. It was the second position on the trial calendar. I indicated that the offer was still one that the defendant had accepted and wanted to move forward. And I believe it was last week that this was scheduled on May 4th. I will take full responsibility for our office in not communicating sooner with her that it had been set for 4 o'clock today. But she has been notified. She's been provided the Zoom link. It's my understanding she's choosing not to sign on to the Zoom link. And I know that she has called the chambers of Your Honor to express dissatisfaction with how she was notified about today. And again, I will agree that our office has dropped the ball as it pertains to today. But I did speak to her last week and let her know that the plea would either be tomorrow because it was on the trial calendar, or likely the day before. Didn't give her a specific time, but made clear that that was what the court had indicated. So I wanted to make that clear for the court and for the record. I would submit to the court that both parties have agreed to this plea, and I know that Your Honor signs for both the state and the defendant, and the state has no objection to that.
Was there any evidence from your review of the file, Mr. Abate, that Ms. Riley had been drinking, ingesting anything that would have impaired her driving ability on November 10th, 2018 at 3:45 in the morning?
No, Your Honor. The only indications that the state had was that she was driving incredibly fast. And I would surmise it was probably because it was late at night where there's less to no one on the road, and it's easier to go faster than 65 on a highway like that.
What's your understanding of the relationship at that time between Mr. Jeremiah and Ms. Riley?
They had been in a romantic relationship for, I don't want to misspeak for Ms. Riley. I think it was a decent amount of time. I can't give the court an exact estimation.
I'll be asking the defense, but the state's understanding that they weren't strangers.
Correct.
They weren't just friends, but they were romantically involved, whatever that might mean.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Any conditions of probation?
So I know that Ms. Oakham had expressed that the victim's family wanted her license suspended indefinitely. I have explained to Ms. Jeremiah that that's something that the court can't do. I understand the court can limit her driving privileges to an extent while on probation, but I'll leave the conditions to the court. There's no conditions that are required by statute. I know that Ms. Riley has several children that went into the state's determination, anything past probation about any sort of fines or fees. I'll leave that into the full discretion of the court, just with the request from Jeremiah's family, Mr. Jeremiah's family, limiting her driving privileges for as long as Your Honor sees is fit and reasonable.
Okay. Do you have any input from Mr. Jeremiah's family?
Good afternoon, Judge.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Cody Brown, who is the decedent's brother, is on the Zoom and would like to speak.
Oh, there he is. Excellent. Mr. Brown, I'm Judge McBurney. Thank you for joining us. If you could unmute, we will hear from you. Give me 1 second before, there we go. We can see you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
All right, Mr. Brown, tell me where you are. And my understanding is you were Mr. Jeremiah's brother. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, tell me, please, what you want about this situation.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm currently at the doctor's office right now.
Are you in Georgia or are you in New York?
I'm in New York City. I'm in New York right now.
Okay.
So pretty much we got a notification basically 2 hours prior to the appointment that you guys have already set up. Around 2:30, my mom was at work. You know, she just wanted to be at the court to have a better understanding of what's going on in the trial and, you know, have a better understanding of what's going on with the situation. So pretty much since everything happened, there was a big lack of communication between the district attorney. Had been through so many different hands, like so many different people went through it. We've just been lost. We don't know who to speak to. I Googled your name. I was able to find your assistant. I spoke with Miss Nelson, and that's how I was able to, you know, get some kind of push through to have some kind of understanding. But pretty much my mom, she really wanted to be in Georgia to have, during this time right now, to have a better understanding of what can be done and what's happening right now.
Okay, well, let me tell you a few things. First, and Mr. Abate already acknowledged it, the district attorney's office did not do a good job of keeping your family informed. So that's a given. And you don't need to tell me more about that. A 2.5 hour notice isn't the proper notice. Second, you are exactly right that this case has probably bounced from prosecutor to prosecutor. There's been a lot of turnover as we have had a new district attorney take office. Mr. Abate was not the original prosecutor to handle this case. He inherited a case where an offer had already been made and accepted. And so that limited profoundly what he'd be able to do with the case. It doesn't matter legally whether he thinks this recommendation is the right one or the wrong one, because it was already a negotiated deal between his office and Mr. Cromwell, who is Ms. Riley's attorney, and he could not undo that. He may think it's the appropriate deal. That is really not relevant to what we're working through here. Finally, I am more than willing to connect with your mother, other members of your brother's family tomorrow at a point that is convenient to your family, on the phone, on a video conference, to answer any questions they may have about the process. Today is when we're handling the plea and when we're dealing with sentencing. Mr. Abate relayed to me that at one point, Mr. Jeremiah's mother, your mother, shared with his predecessor on the case what she felt would be a reasonable outcome. And it was actually lower, less severe than what the prosecutor then on the case thought was appropriate. But armed with Mr. Jeremiah's mother's perspective, she locked in that offer with the defense. It was after the offer had been accepted and become official that it sounds like your mother had a change of heart and said, actually, I think it should be something different. That's helpful input. It's necessary input, but never does the victim's family control exactly how things flow. And I share that with you just to explain. And none of what I'm telling you right now undoes the mistake of giving you and your family the late notice that you received about what's happening today. But I'll repeat my offer. We won't do it today, given the hour, but I am happy to meet with your mother, you, others, to talk about the process. Your mother and you might want to insist upon the same with the district attorney's office so that you get a better explanation as to how things played out. Do you have anything you want to share with me personally or on behalf of other family members as to what you think the appropriate outcome is in this case?
As of now, whatever conversations that my mom had with the I think her name is Miss
Ocom,
yeah, her. I'm not sure exactly what she wants to get done or better suggestions. Whatever was dealt with them, that might be, her best option. But as far as family wise, my mom is kind of devastated right now and she's not on the Zoom call. Pretty much she's at work. She got a 2-hour notification about this, and I'm pretty sure everybody else got a 2-week notice or a week notice or a couple of days in advance notice. So pretty much she's devastated. Yeah, my nephew, he's going through a lot. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not just saying it just to say it, a lot of mental breakdowns. There's times where he's just saying like, he just go through the motions, basically go through depression. Daughters, they're growing well. I mean, they're children, but they still don't have a great understanding of what's going on right now, but they just know that their father isn't here. Me, I have a great understanding of what's going on. Yeah, and that's pretty much it.
how many children did Mr. Jeremiah, how many children did your brother have?
3.
Okay. And are they all in New York?
Just 1.
Okay. Where are the other 2?
The state of Georgia.
Okay. All right. Well, Mr. Brown, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to connect and to share with me what you did. Do you have any other questions for me?
How can I stay in contact with you so we can contact tomorrow?
So Ms. Nelson, the person either that you spoke to or your mother did, she and I work together. So someone can reach out to Ms. Nelson tomorrow morning and we can figure out a time to have a conversation if that's what you and your family want to do. Okay.
Okay. And today, can you explain a little more what today is again?
So Ms. Riley has entered a guilty plea, admitting the responsibility for what happened in November of 2018, that she was driving way over the speed limit and that her reckless driving caused your brother's death. She's pled guilty to that. What's going to happen next is I'm going to hear from her lawyer, Mr. Cromwell. There may be family members of Ms. Riley that I hear from. I'll hear from Ms. Riley if there's anything she wants to say, and then I'll impose sentence. The recommendation, and it's a joint recommendation because of the offer that Ms. Ocom made way back when, that Ms. Riley accepted, is that Ms. Riley go to prison for a year, and that she then be on probation for 9 more years. That's what we're working through right now. I'm not bound by that. I could decide that she should not go to prison for that long, for whatever reason. I could decide that she should go to prison for longer than that, for whatever reason. But I'll be pronouncing sentence today, and we'll go from there. Does that explain a little bit more about what we're doing?
Yeah, and then basically after that, everything is closed.
Well, it's closed in the sense that she will have been sentenced. In theory, Ms. Riley, she'll have some very, very limited appeal rights if she wanted to challenge this. But the chapter of is Ms. Riley going to trial, or is she accepting responsibility for what she did and being sentenced that way, that chapter will be closed. Certainly it doesn't bring your brother back, but we then move on. She serves her sentence, and hopefully people begin to heal a little bit more.
Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to mute you again, but if you, or you can mute yourself. If you got a question later on, again, just call Ms. Nelson, okay? Great. Mr. Cromwell. Oh, before we get to you, Mr. Cromwell, Ms. Mann or Ms. Jackson, do you have any additional information about Ms. Riley in your files?
No, Your Honor, that was the first cycle for Ms. Riley. There are no other cycles or any other arrests in her GCIC, Your Honor.
Excellent. Thank you so much. You are both are free to go if you want to get out of here, having stuck around for so long, but I needed to get that nugget to get a better sense of where we are. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Your Honor.
We're going to be taking a plea tomorrow morning. So if one of you could plug in to that would be real helpful. If you could dial in, I think we're going to have a Zoom session. Ms. Nelson can help you with that, but if you could be plugged in around 9, that would be great.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. Thank you both. Appreciate your patience. Mr. Cromwell.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. I guess I need to get closer to the microphone.
Well, yes, so that Ms. Rivers can hear you. Thanks.
Yes, Your Honor. And you know, these cases are always tragic for the families of the deceased and for the defendant. To add a little bit more context, they were in a romantic relationship. In fact, they were engaged. And this had been a long-term relationship, so it was a devastation for Miss Riley too. Miss Riley is a lady. She's got some children. She homeschools her children. She's been working in her sort of a family restaurant. No really GCIC any other felonies. In fact, Your Honor, I was going to request, Mr. Abate wouldn't object, but if this is because this is her first felony, if you would consider a first offender component to this for her, so she can get on and try to learn from this. And so we would ask that the court would accept I guess the joint recommendation, considering the context and considering this is basically unfortunately a speeding case. And whatever the court thinks about driver's license, you know, I understand Mr. Abate's point on that and the concerns.
Okay. Ms. Riley, is there anything you want to share with me before I figure out how we're going to proceed?
I'm a mother of 4.
Can you take your mask off, please? Just let me hear you.
Mother of 4. I just had a baby. He's 8 months. I homeschool.
How old are your kids?
19. My other daughter will be 17 on the 18th of this month. I have a 7-year-old, and then the newborn will be 1 in August.
So from 19, an adult, to almost 1.
Mhm.
Okay. And are any of your kids with Mr. Jeremiah?
No,
Okay. But two of his kids are somewhere in Georgia. They're not with you.
no,
Okay. How long had you and Mr. Jeremiah been talking?
about 2 years.
10 or 2?
Two.
2. Thanks. Okay. And that night, November 10th, or that early morning, where were you going?
To get something to eat.
At 3:45 in the morning?
He wanted to go get something to eat.
Did he have a driver's license?
I think so. I'm not 100% sure.
Why were you driving instead of he driving?
He wasn't supposed to be in the state of Georgia.
Why is that?
He had some stuff going on before we met. And he got ordered by a judge to.
Oh, he'd been banished from Georgia as
Yeah.
part of his sentence.
Yeah,
Okay. The 2 years you all have been hanging out together, that was all in Georgia?
yes,
And was Mr. Jeremiah banished from Georgia throughout those 2 years, or that's something that came up during your relationship?
well, that happened, whatever the incident was before our relationship, but he was still going through it. I want to say he was on probation at the time. He had to come here like 2 or 3 times a week. And I guess the final, after his probation was up, that was the final term.
Okay. And you all were going to get food.
Yeah,
You were just going real fast.
well, we were going home.
You had gotten the food.
Yeah.
And you were going real fast.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you want to add?
I just, I'm my kids, all they have is me.
Okay. Well, obviously, Mr. Jeremiah's kids don't have him.
Right, right.
Your kids at least have you. When you say you homeschool, your 19-year-old, if in school, would be in college.
She goes to college.
Is she here?
Yeah,
She's right
all
there.
my kids are here.
All right. Where do you go to college? Georgia State, right down the street. The 17-year-old would be in high school, but is homeschooled or is in high school?
She's in high school and
Hey, Rachel, I'm going to mute you again. If you unmute, I'm going to remove you from the call, okay? All right. Is Rachel with you, or that would be someone with Mr. Jeremiah?
That is mom.
Okay. Your 17-year-old
she's in high school and she's also do dual enrollment at Georgia Military College.
okay, but not homeschooled.
No.
All right.
It's
So,
only my 7-year-old
okay. And the 7-year-old is
here.
right there. Okay. And is the homeschooling because of concerns about COVID, or it's just you homeschool?
Concerns about COVID.
What's the family restaurant?
It's a Jamaican restaurant and grocery store.
And is it
It's
you?
me and my mother, owners. It's just us. That's how we provide for our family.
Okay. There are other people in here though, or I assume it's extended family, but are they part of either the business or the support network for your family?
Yes.
Okay.
But how do I speak?
All right. All right. If I go along with this recommendation, or anything close to it, you're going to prison for a while. Are you prepared to go into custody today? You need to speak aloud your answer.
Oh, no.
Okay. When is it that you'd be prepared to go into custody?
Well, the last day of my son's school is May 27th, which is just, the end of this month.
Your son is the 17-year-old?
My son is the 8-year-old. Well,
The 8-year-old. I thought he's being homeschooled.
Right. I'm the one that's.
Why would you not be able to end school sooner if you're the principal and teacher and?
I'm his teacher, but he also, it's Georgia Academy, Georgia Cyber Academy. So
Oh.
in a school.
I'm hearing now.
All right. he is at home, but his teachers are through the Cyber Academy.
Right, but their program, it's like parent and teacher, we work together. It's not just the teachers.
Okay, got it. All right. Mr. Abate, what is the state's view about when Ms. Riley ought to report?
I will leave it in full discretion of the court.
Ms. Riley, anything else you want to add?
I'm sorry. It's a tragic accident.
It is, and it sounds to me like it. What were you wearing a seatbelt? You don't remember?
No,
You know you were not wearing a seatbelt?
I don't remember.
Okay. Do you know if Mr. Jeremiah was wearing a seatbelt?
I don't remember.
Did he stay in the car or was he ejected from the car?
I mean, I woke up in the hospital.
Okay. When you woke up, you're in the emergency room.
Right.
All right. Well, first, I find there's a factual basis for your plea. I also find that your plea is knowing and voluntary. Voluntary means that even though you're not particularly excited to be in the seat you're sitting in, no one's forced you to enter this plea, but after consulting with Mr. Cromwell and family, you've decided it's in your best interest to move forward with the plea. Is that correct?
Yes.
And knowing means you've understood everything Mr. Abate talked to you about. You don't have any questions about anything right now. Is that also true?
Yes.
And I'll accept your plea. I am sentencing you pursuant to the Probation Options Management Act, which means that for the portion of your sentence that is on probation, should you have a technical violation, and I hope you have no violations, but if it's minor, you and probation work through that. But if you have any motor vehicle violation and any felony violation, that comes back to me and we'll work through what the consequences ought to be for your probation. Yes,
Can I say something else?
you can keep saying things.
Okay. I just asked for a little bit of time because I'm trying to get my son switched back to regular school, you know, because I'll be in prison. So I just need a little time to get myself together. That's it.
Tell me what a little time is.
I got to go to the school. He has to get a physical, ear, eye, and dental. I'll say by the time his school is done on the 27th, I should have everything taken care of.
Who will be his primary caregiver?
My mother.
Pardon me?
My mother. His dad is deceased. That's his dad's mother right there.
She's here?
She's right there.
Okay. So his grandmother will be his primary caregiver. Okay. And same with your youngest or someone different?
His dad is here.
The 8 months old father is here.
Well, yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. I'm just looking at the calendar to see where the 27th is in the grand scheme of things. Okay. Ms. Riley, I understand the sentiment that I suspect Mr. Jeremiah's mom would express, which is there's no amount of time that is enough because she has lost her son. Mr. Brown was a little more reserved in that, but I suspect that he also would agree that it doesn't really matter what we do to you, Mr. Jeremiah is gone. Of course, it does matter because you are a human, you are a mother, you are a daughter, and you have people who care about you and people who depend on you. Of course, the same is true about Mr. Jeremiah, but depending on him now would be a futile project because he's dead. And that was a result of your reckless driving. That said, I have heard nothing from the state, and I suspect I would have heard it if there was any inclination that this was anything more than recklessness, where you took your own life in your hands as well. And Mr. Evans and the woman driving the Buick LeSabre, they all could be dead too, and your situation would be even more complicated. That doesn't lessen the loss of Mr. Jeremiah's family. Nothing brings Mr. Jeremiah back. But another equally compelling perspective is the one that says, what is the value of sending you away for 10 years? Does that bring Mr. Jeremiah back? It does not. Does that help your kids grow up into productive members of society? It does not. There's nothing in your history that suggests you are an ongoing menace. You may not have all the driving freedom you want while you're under sentence, but I do not have in front of me someone with a history of domestic violence or a history of abusing drugs or stealing things from other people. But you had a very, very fateful morning when you and Mr. Jeremiah were driving. You were driving, putting anything on him. You were driving in a way that resulted in this tragedy. And there are consequences for that. And given the outcome, it's not that Mr. Jeremiah broke his leg. He's going to have trouble walking now. He's deceased. I think it makes sense that you are out of commission for a while. I think this recommendation reflects that. A year of your life, you will be away from those you love. And you'll have time to reflect, as I'm sure you already have, on the mistakes that were made that morning on November 10th. I will follow the negotiated resolution. On count 1, your sentence will be 10 years to serve 1 year with the balance probated. Your sentences on counts 2 through 4 will be 12 months to serve. They will all run concurrently with each other. So it's a total sentence of 10 years to serve 1 year with the balance probated. You will have your driving privileges restricted when you are on probation. So for 9 years, you'll be able to drive to and from work. And if you have children who are enrolled in school and they're going physically to school, you will be able to drive them to and from school. If you want to go on a picnic on a Saturday, someone else drives you to that picnic. If you are ever pulled over and you are not on your way to work, on your way home, on your way to school, on your way back, that's a violation of your probation. And as I mentioned, it's my instruction to probation that not only do arrests for felonies come back to me, but any moving violation, speeding ticket, not a parking ticket, speeding ticket, ran a red light, all that comes back to me, and we'll work through what the consequences will be, not only for your ticket, but for your probation. I'll take that pretty seriously given why we are together. Will also be a special condition of your probation that you complete 200 hours of community service. You don't have to do that week 1, month 1, but within the first 2 years of your probation, you'll need to complete the 200 hours of community service. In terms of turning yourself in, I'm going to give you until Friday the 20th. Friday, May 20th, you'll need to report here, courtroom 8D at 9 a.m. If you are not here at 9 a.m. on May 20th, I am imposing a sentence of 10 years to serve 3 years. You will triple the custodial portion of your sentence if you're not here. Or Mr. Cromwell is here saying she's on her way. There needs to be a warm body in this courtroom by 9 a.m. on Friday, May 20th. It ought to be yours, and the deputies will take you into custody, so don't bring luggage or anything like that. And all the farewells that you're going to have need to happen before that morning. Do not bring family members here on the 20th to say farewell to them then. You say farewell to them before you show up. And again, so everyone's clear, if it's 9:05 and I haven't heard from Mr. Cromwell that you're on your way or you're not here, the sentence that I'm going to sign is 10 years to serve 3 years. There'll be a warrant. You're not going to be hard to find. I don't think you're a flight risk, but you will have tripled the custodial portion of your sentence. Mr. Abate, anything? Oh, and I'm declining the invitation for first offender. I heard the request, but given what happened in this case, I'm not comfortable with that outcome. Mr. Abate, anything else in connection with Ms. Riley's case?
Your Honor, I believe Miss Brown, the victim's mother, may still be on the Zoom. It's my understanding from speaking with Ms. Rolock, she would just like to address the court briefly before we end today.
Okay, we'll do that. I assume that's the Rachel who's been dialing in.
Yes, Your Honor.
So either Mr. Brown or, and I don't mean to call you by the wrong last name. So the person who's connected via Rachel, if you want to unmute now, I'm happy to hear from you.
This is Rachel, Anthony's mother. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can.
I'm sorry.
You don't need to apologize. This is not an easy situation for anyone involved.
I'm so hurt. With everything that happened, my son's life was taken away. There is a trial today. And my family and I was not able to be present because I only learned about the court date at 2:30 today. Now Miss Riley was aware of the court date where she could bring her entire family to the hearing along with absent parent family to the court date. My son and his 3 children, along with my husband and his only brother, could not have been present. Or at work where I have a panic attack because
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir, Mr. Brown.
Wow, where are you? Wow,
I'm in the car. I'm in the car.
where are you?
I'm in the car.
Where
I'm
at?
parked. I'm parked up in the car.
So, Mr. Brown, have you had a chance to explain to your mother that she and you and I can have a conversation tomorrow or sometime soon?
I have a question for Mr. Riley. Can you just explain to me what happened? What happened? What happened? Listen to my son's death.
Mr. Brown, what's your mother's last name?
Rachel Jeremiah Brown.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
All right, Ms. Brown, I'm gonna, we should talk more, but it doesn't sound like right now is a time when we're gonna be able to have a meaningful conversation. I understand why you're upset. And I've talked with your son, Cody Brown, about my disappointment that you got such short notice. And I'm happy to talk with you more about that tomorrow or a time at your convenience when you're in a slightly better state of mind. But right now it's real hard to understand what it is you're saying because you are very understandably upset. All right. Mr. Cromwell, anything else on behalf of Ms. Riley?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Ms. Riley, tell me when you're going to be back in this courtroom.
At 8 a.m. on the 20th.
Okay, if you're here at 8, you may get a locked door, but you can get here early.
Okay.
9 a.m. is
I'm gonna
when.
be outside in the line.
Okay, great. May 20th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Your
much, Your
Honor.
Honor.